founder and managing director at Black Square Recruitment and has over 11 years of experience in his own recruitment company. Dan specializes in the optical market, and he's shown me a real passion for the industry, and he's helped try and secure placements for many students over the difficulties of over the lockdown. He tries to help the right people get on a stepping stone into a business. This is Dan Jobber. Thank you very much for coming in to speak to me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I wanted to talk and share the amazing story of what you've done to help students in the last few months or in this last year. As everyone knows, with the lockdown, it was really quite hard for a lot of students. A lot of students lost their jobs, or those students that had a placement actually had their positions cancelled. So do you want to just share what we've done to help those students?
Yes, of course. So we'd had a conversation at the beginning of lockdown, and it seemed that the students had a real tough time. They got the raw end of the deal there. So I wanted to help. Optics is an industry I've been working alongside and supporting for many years, and so we decided that if I could utilize my network to try and help pre-reg students find placements, I would do that. And obviously, there's to remove any barriers there. We've done that free of charge to clients. Hopefully, we've made a few introductions and have found some people the pre-reg placement that they really need to continue their studies.
And following on from that, just what sort of things do you think students or someone that might have been out of work for a while, or anyone that's hoping to change jobs, what are the sorts of things that they should be making sure that their CVs have on there? Or, what are tips that we have for our CVs to look as good as possible? Because there's a surge of new candidates there. What can we do to make ourselves stand out?
I think especially with students and newly qualified, or even if you're a pre-reg position, there's a lot of competition. Maybe not so much for an experienced optometrist, but certainly the students, And I would say, just to give you some sort of basics advice, I've sat with hiring managers, and they spend a second looking at your CV. They might have a stack of 20 that they've got to go through. So I think it's really keen to keep that in your mind when you're writing your CV. Keep it short. The purpose of a CV is to give the client or the company, the hiring manager, enough information so that they can then make a decision if they want to see you or not. A CV is not really, you don't want a massive document. They're just not going to read it. So keep it short. As creative as some people are, just use white paper. It's fine. Keeping the formatting very simple. We're not going for graphic design competition or anything like that. The most recent experience first. Think about the role that you're applying for, and try and tailor your CV to that role with the relevant information first. If you've got your swimming badges, that's great, but is that going to make a difference for a hiring manager to take you or someone else over that role? Definitely not. Can it be on your CV? Yeah, sure, if you've got enough room. It will give the interviewer a talking point in the interview. But yeah, that kind of stuff doesn't need to be at the top of your CV. So most recent experience first. Just make it as easy for the hiring manager to think who you are, where do you live, what's your experience, should I take them to the next stage?
Amazing. And what about when we do go to that next stage? What are the sorts of things that we need to prepare for? So obviously there's lots of companies out there. We've got Specsavers, Boots, Vision Express, but then there's lots of independents. And everyone's interviewing systems or questions will be slightly different, especially when we're doing high street optom compared to a hospital placement sort of situation. What advice have you got for people looking to apply to the different roles with regards to interview process?
Also, the interviewers are going to have different levels of experience themselves. If you're applying for a role in an independent, they may not have interviewed anyone for 5 years. Who knows? whereas if you're applying for a multiple, they would have interviewed maybe 15 people that day. So, you can help the interview process by doing some preparation yourself. Firstly, do some research on the company. The more you know about the company, the better. The more informed you're going to be if it's the right role for you, because it's obviously an interview is a two-way process. You need to make a decision as well if the company's right for you. The only way you can do that is by having enough information. So find out everything you can on the internet first, and then maybe have some questions prepared for in the interview if they don't answer anything. If you can't find that information online, for example, have some examples clear in your mind. There's going to be common themes throughout the interview. They're going to look how you operate in a team. They're going to look at your clinical ability. They're going to look at your commercial awareness, how you interact with patients. This, regardless of your skill level or experience, these are all going to be questions that are asked. So the best way to answer those questions is to have a think about your own experience. You want to kind of tick as many boxes as possible on that interview question. So I find the best way to do that is to use a situation, action, results format for your answer. So initially explain the situation you're in, tell the interviewer the actions that you took in response to that situation, and then give them the results of your actions. So if you can link that back to the business, if you can include any figures where possible, that's, you're going to think of it as scoring as many points as possible on each interview. And that will make the interviewer's life a lot easier, which again, we want the interviewer coming away from the interview having a really positive experience and being very excited about potentially you joining the team. So we don't want to throw any doubts in there as well. So probably steer clear of any negative experiences you've had or anything negative about previous or indeed future employers.
I think that's a very valid point with regards to bringing things with you and having done the research. And sometimes it's not just research that you need to do on the company, but it's research you need to do on yourself. Although it might be a bit more difficult to do for a student or a newly graduate person, for those people that have already been working in practice and they're looking for another job elsewhere or looking to change to another job, you've got figures that are at your disposal. So what is your conversion rate like? What is your, sales numbers, etc., which taking those figures into an interview can only be a positive impact for that interviewer, because they can actually look at the fact that actually you've come in prepared, you're commercially aware, and you're hopefully going to be better for the business. But then what about the clinical side? Do you find that they need to be more prepared on that front? Do you think at interviews they get questioned on their clinical abilities? Do they get questioned on like a case scenario, for example? How do we prepare for that sort of scenario?
Yeah, it really comes down to the client there. A lot of independents are going to look for people with certain clinical skills, maybe for the more advanced roles. I'm not suggesting that if you don't know about a particular subject that you can cram it the night before, but it's definitely worth just having a few ideas in your mind and I would jot them down beforehand, so if they do ask you about a patient that you saw that had some pathology wrong, or maybe the use of a piece of equipment, at least if you know what the equipment is, might be handy. So again, you could get that from your research, the type of equipment that the practice have in store, and it's not a problem if you haven't used a particular piece of equipment. Most companies are going to train you on that, but at least you can be aware that they use an OCT in practice, and you may not have had any experience using an OCT, but if you can demonstrate that you're keen to do that, that's going to help. Generally, newly qualifieds, you've just done all your exams, everything's fresh in your mind, that you're probably not going to be tested too much clinically, probably going to be more on the patient interactions and that kind of thing. Your testing times is is really what a lot of employers are looking at that stage.
So what is the sort of testing time that a newly qualified should kind of aim for?
I mean, it does depend on the environment that you're going to work in. There's, 20 minutes is the quickest, I think, that most companies are going to be asking for. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that a longer test leads to better conversion rates. And, we work with independents that don't have a testing time. And again, maybe in a domiciliary environment, testing times just aren't on their radar as much. Again, you need to be prepared for the type of environment that you're going in. If it's a busy multiple, they're going to be looking at quicker testing times. But again, you might have your pre-screening done. The clinic might be very organized. All of these things sort of should be taken into consideration.
And with regards to what's been happening now, you mentioned, as we were talking earlier, that lots of things have changed. There is that snowball effect of lots of patients wanting to be seen, but because of COVID and the lockdown, not being able to have their appointments. And now there is a surge of practices looking for more optometrists. So what other sorts of optometrists and what locations are you guys looking for?
So definitely with the pre-reg students, some locations are more difficult to fill than others. I'm sure we know those areas, but it's generally coastal areas where there's a shortage of optometrists in that region. Salaries are higher in those locations. Working conditions are more flexible generally in those areas. If you're in a university town, and there's a couple of hundred other students all qualifying at the same time as you, there's not a couple of hundred vacancies in that city. So you're going to have to travel and potentially relocate. Definitely if I was an optometrist, they're the most beautiful parts of the country that have the highest wages. So I would spend some time really considering where you maybe have a network of friends, where you can relocate to, and give yourself as many options as possible to secure a placement. And that will come down to flexibility, really.
And one of the difficult conversations that a lot of students have with their current employer if they're trying to leave, especially if they're a newly qualified and they have a tie-in contract.
Yeah.
How do we approach this? Is there is it that another employer would be able to pay for it? How do we break a tie-in contract?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible. We do it weekly. Tie-ins are relatively new in optics. Certainly the past few years they've become standard. Most of the larger multiples will buy you out of your tie-in. You need to get an itemized bill from your current employer. Some employers use the tie-in to persuade you to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And they might make it seem a little bit bigger and scarier than it really is. It's definitely achievable to move if you have a tie-in. Again, the only thing I would say is if you're in an easy to recruit in area, if you're in Northwest London, Birmingham, Manchester, the uni cities, employers are probably going to lean towards someone without a tie-in because they're going to have a higher volume of applicants. So you're more likely to get the tie-in paid in a difficult to recruit in area. But normally most of our clients will just tie you in again. So you can make a move and they'll pay your tie-in and you'll be tied in for an additional year. I wouldn't worry too much if you want to make a move and have a tie-in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today and talking me through quite a few topics today. What I'll be doing is obviously passing across your details to any other students that I have that are looking for help doing with their recruitment.
Sure. Thank you ever so much.